Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Guru. Yata Sarvani Bhutani Pratibhanti Stitani Cha Yatraivu Pashamam Yanti Tasmai Satyatmane Namaha. So I think we start a new section tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
So will you help us out, please, Puneet?
Section 3. Vasana Tyago Dve Vidha. The renunciation of mental impressions is of two kinds. Na devam na cha karmani na dhanani na bandhavaha sharanam bhavabhitanam swaprayatnat hrited rinam. Accepting self-effort, neither fate nor actions or effort, nor wealth, nor kinsmen are the refuge of men frightened by worldly existence.
So here he is echoing what Krishna says in Gita, that a person raises themselves into the self by themselves. Yes, we have Guru's grace, Guru Kripa, God's grace, destiny, etc. But all of those manifest as Purushartha, self-effort, Paurusham. Armchair grace doesn't work. Now, by God's grace, we're inspired to do the work. The engine for this self-effort is our mumukshutva, our burning desire for liberation. But if we have this false idea that if we just buy some vibhuti ash on the internet or get some Ganga water in a little vial or set up a murti of Shirdi Sai Baba, that's going to do it. No. It may build our faith to do these things, but in the end, abhyasa vairagyacha. Our practice and our intense spirit of renunciation is what need be done. Any thoughts on this? So I'm always very fascinated by people who come to class and then I'll say, who here is meditating every day? One or two hands will go up, all the rest, they're not. And they think they're going to get knowledge by osmosis. It ain't going to happen. And in this world, you can't get anything other than by self-effort. Now, what about those who win the lottery? Okay, but that's very, very rare, and that's due to punya from past actions. By and large, everything in life, from the secular to the spiritual, is the result of our own hard work. Any thoughts on this before we go on? Next verse.
Upadeyyanupattanam heyekanti heyekanta vivarjanam yate tat manaso rama tam bandham vidhi netarat. Rama, pursuing what is fit to be acquired and abandoning invariably what is fit to be left. Know this attitude of the mind as bondage, nothing else.
So my bondage is I must have this, I must get rid of that. Now, let's hold this in a context that's a little bit larger. In the world, what you need to acquire, for example, is good money saving skills. If what you want to do is acquire some wealth and let go of habits of compulsive spending. But in the end, these all go. So the other term we get is kartavya, obligatory action. Here, what the scripture is saying is this fundamental idea. Getting what I want is going to make me happy. Getting rid of what I don't like, that's going to make me happy. The mind of the woman of wisdom is the mind that is free from the need to struggle. Now, this seems to be in contradiction to the prior verse where it says everything is accomplished by self-effort. How do we reconcile that? The best example I've ever found is a ballet dancer. So if you've ever taken a dance class and you've ever tried to do a pirouette where you turn on one foot, it's really hard because most of us have no sense of balance. We have a hard time finding that center point. So you work really hard to find the place where you don't work. Once you've found it, you can turn around that center point with great ease. Can't remember the movie. I think it's called Knights in White Satin or something like that, with the great ballet dancer Baryshnikov, where he does 11 pirouettes in street shoes on camera. It's not tricky photography. So we work hard to find the place where we don't work hard. It's a paradox. But this idea of giving up struggle is not flaccid yoga. It's not limp yoga. Oh, I'm just going to sit here. God will do it. Going on.
Heya deya drishau tyaktva sheshastha sthutiro bhava sanvidvi yavashat praptam drishyam ashrayate manaha. Having given up the view that a thing is fit to be abandoned or fit to be acquired, be perfectly still or quiescent, abiding in the residual reality. On account of the energy of consciousness, the mind resorts to or experiences the visible object met with.
So, what is it that we're supposed to do? In our meditation seat, see if you can bring your mind to the place where all struggles cease. The way I like to look at it is this. You can do your yoga from the neck up. I want the thought flow to be very quiet. But we also have to do from the neck down in the heart. We have to find that place in our meditation. All our strivings cease. Mind is not continuing to throw up sankalpa. Have deep abiding shanti, peace. Next verse.
Jim, the last part where he says, on account of the energy of consciousness, the mind resorts to or experiences the visible object met with. Is that you're just living moment to moment from that point?
Well, that's what makes the stuff up there happen. It's this energy of this Vikshepa Shakti that makes these things appear and then makes me want to go after them.
I see.
So if you're sitting in meditation and you're starting to think about projects at work, or antithetically, you're thinking about the crash of the stock market, that's the energy of consciousness. The Vikshepa Shakti that causes that to happen. Going on.
Yada shrayasi drishyam tvam tat satchitosi bandhavan yada drishyam satyajasi tada chittosi mokshavan aham bhavam mai chitva bhava sansara paragah. When you betake yourself to the seen or the visible universe, then you are with the mind or thought and bound. When you totally give up the seen or the visible universe, then you are without the mind or thoughts and liberated. Cutting off or annihilating that which consists of the idea or thought of I, be one who has crossed over worldly existence.
So here it's very similar to what the Buddhists teach. They talk about dependent origination, so that the perception of the phenomenal world and the individual knower of the world arise together, and they are caused by the movement of the mind. So you can either approach it from the standpoint, who am I? Letting go of every idea of self. And when that individual knower falls, so will the perception of the world. Or you can renounce the world. Sarva Maya, Sarva Mananda, all is Maya, all is bliss. Or a combination of the two. Mind is the world is the mind. Now, I came across a metaphor that I really like. Consciousness is like a great sea of water. And the names and forms are like shapes of ice in the sea of consciousness. They're just a slower vibration. They're no different than the water. What happens to them? All the ice forms eventually melt, go back to the unformed Prakriti nature. They are nothing other than the sea of consciousness. They exist for a time. What is it that causes the ice structures in the sea of consciousness to form? Thoughting. Thoughts are things and they have wings. So one of the deep teachings of this scripture thought is the subtle form of the perceivable object, and if you continue to contemplate it, it grossifies into what we experience as the material world. But it's still just consciousness. If I think it's solid, if I think it's real, if I think it's separate, as the result of ignorance, then I get into trouble. But if I see it for what it is, just vibration held together by thought, nothing is ever outside of God, outside of the self. Next verse.
Shri Rama Uvacha Ati Gambhira me Vaitat Bhagavan Vachanam Tava Yadi Tyajamyahankaram Deho Nunam Vinashyati. Sri Rama said, Venerable sage, extremely deep or inscrutable are your words. If I shall give up the ego or I consciousness, the body will certainly perish.
So, what the scripture is saying here is, what is the chief idea that holds my ignorance, my egoism in place? If I think I'm a person, I think that if I become nothing, if I give up everything, I'll be the hole in the donut, I'll disappear, I will cease to exist. Won't the body die if I disappear? So ego keeps trying to hold on to its own existence. It's a false idea. It's an illusory fear. Next verse.
Vasishta Uvacha Dvividho Vasana Tyago Dheyo Jyeshashva Namataha. Vasishta said, the renunciation of mental impressions is of two kinds, namely, that to be contemplated on, dhyeya, and that to be known or perceived, gneya.
Read it again, please.
The renunciation of mental impressions is of two kinds, namely, that to be contemplated on, dhyeya, and that to be known or perceived, gneya.
Okay, I'm not sure where he's going with this, but let's just take it at its literal meaning. He's giving us the two kinds of the renunciation of vasanas and how we're going to proceed with that. Because this renunciation of the vasanas ultimately is our liberation. Let's see where he goes with it. Going on.
Aham esham padarthanam ete cha mama jivitam naham aite vina kaschit namai ye te vinakila ityantar nishchayam kritva vicharya manasa dridam matva naham padarthasya na padartho mametyapi antashilataya buddhya kurvato lila ya kriyaha yo nunam vasanatyago dhyeyo rama sakirtitaha. I am of these things or categories. These are my life or existence. Without these, I am not anybody. Without me, these indeed are not. Rama, thus having resolved within and having investigated thoroughly by the mind and considering or understanding, quote, I am not of such thing or category. Also, the thing or category is not of me, close quote. The renunciation of mental impressions as above, by one performing actions sportively with a cool or calm mind or intellect within, that indeed is declared as dhyeya, that to be contemplated on.
Yes.
No, there's a
Go
note.
ahead.
This rather complex construction conveys the process of inquiry leading to the giving up of mental impressions by the strength of the discriminating will, which ultimately leads to the quietude of the mind and the perception of the self.
So what he's talking about is the classic Vedantic meditation of subject-object discrimination. I am not the body. I am not the prana. I am not the feelings. I am not the thoughts. I'm not any idea of self. Not even pure ignorance. I have a friend who used to be in executive sales, made about $300,000 a year doing that. Had a beautiful Victorian house in Alameda, owned 2 boats, had a income property in the city, had a flat in Atlanta, Georgia. And I won't go into the reasons, but he pretty much trashed his whole life. And he came to me and he said, Jim, I just need a new narrative. You know, I don't know what to say to people when they ask me who I am. I need a narrative. I need a narrative. And, you know, the context was not Vedanta, so I didn't press the issue. But that's how most of us think of ourselves. There's a narrative who I am. Now that narrative can be what I do, how much I make, the house I have, how many degrees I have, the clan or family or caste I come from, what I've accomplished. Or it can be the other side, my trauma as a child, my dysfunctional family, some disability that I have to deal with. And there's this constant tape that runs in my mind. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is who I am. Pay attention to when you're in conversation. What do you repeatedly tell people about yourself? So these narratives, these stories, this is what we have to give up. I am not this. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Sarvam samataya buddhya yam kritva vasanakshayam jahati nirmamo deham yeyo sau vasanakshayah. Having known or perceived everything with equality or sameness, and having destroyed all mental impressions, when one abandons or disregards the body without the sense of mine, that is the destruction of mental impressions called nyaya, or that to be known or perceived. Note, this refers to the absolute absorption in being consciousness devoid of all ego and ideation.
So this process is twofold. The first part of the process, which was in the prior verse, I am not the body, etc. We're discriminating between the self and the not self. This verse says, well, actually, that's only half of it. What we've been calling the not self. Look at it two ways. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The phenomenal world, meaning the names and forms are illusion. But then we have that other great saying from Chandogya, Sarvam Kalvida Brahma. All this is verily Brahma. So what we need to endeavor to do is to perceive the phenomenal world with the samadrishta, this equality of vision, giving up my compulsive reactivity to the world, keeping the mind intensely introverted. Someone used to call it tuning up to the mind. The mind meditation. Keep turning the volume level down on our reactivity to the world. Let it be. And then when we've given up the last attachment, the last identification, the mind slips easily into samadhi. And as Shankara says, we're not only a full knower of the Supreme, but we've retired into the Supreme. Now, for the person of wisdom, they may perceive a phenomenal world, but it no longer has the power to agitate. Then act as you will in the world. Any thoughts on this?
What I keep on coming back to recently is, what you keep on telling me is, whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. And I've heard you say that over and over in this class.
Yes.
It's very interesting if I take everything besides me as just exactly the way it's meant to be, then I have no need to get upset. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I'm able to walk away from conflict, even if someone's screaming at me for no reason. It's been very interesting. It's only through meditation that I've done it, really.
Well, and Justin, if that may be one of these narrative stories, I'm compulsive about conflict, and you can let that go.
No, I understand. I'm just saying.
Let that go. Yeah.
For the first time, I'm just saying I've been able to, and it's very amazing. Yeah.
And that's your purusharta, your self-effort.
Yeah.
Good work. Good work. Next verse.
Dvavetau raghava tyagao samau mukta pade sthitao Dvavetau brahmatam yatao Dvavetau vigata jvarao Raghava, Rama. These two renunciations of mental impressions stand equally in the step or path of the liberated. These two states free from mental impressions have attained to Brahmanhood, or the state of the Supreme Being. These two states, devoid of mental impressions, are free from fever or distress.
So to summarize, what are the two? First, we do the subject-object discrimination. I'm not the body, not the mind, not the intellect, etc. What am I? The ground of being, the emptiness, the chidakash, the space of awareness itself. What is this world? Simply consciousness appearing as name and form. Just a light show. Just a hologram. Ice cubes in the sea of consciousness. Nothing but consciousness. Next verse.
Ipsi tani psite nasto yasyanta sarva vastushu suptavat cheshtate yascha samukta iti kathyate. He is declared as liberated within whom there is neither desire nor its opposite for all objects, and who moves about or acts like one asleep. Note: this does not mean insensibility or absence of efficiency. Just as a sleeping man is unaffected by likes and dislikes, the yogi in whom thought is quietened is not attracted or repelled by worldly objects or circumstances.
Yes. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. An interesting thing happens when we quit yearning for the world or fighting with it. We start to become a light that shines into the darkness of ignorance. The greatest gift you can give anyone or any situation is holding sacred space, tuning up your mind, disappearing, letting that light, pure awareness, the Shakti pass through. It does all the work. It's a healing presence. It's a smoothing presence. It's a reconciling presence. So the woman or the man of wisdom is not useless. Perhaps they are the most useful, though they of themselves do nothing. Master Jesus said, I of myself do no thing. It is the Father within that doeth the work. That's how he framed in language this idea of the individuality. It's gone. We become an instrument, we become a channel of this God force coming through us. Next verse.
Harsha Marsha Bhaya Krodha Kamakarpanya Drishtabhihi Na Paramrishyate Yontaha Sa Jivan Mukta Uchyate. She who is not assailed or polluted within by considerations or views of exaltation, jealousy, fear, anger, desire, and wretchedness is said to be liberated while living.
Yes. So these qualities of the mind have been turned down. They no longer operate the way they do in the person of ignorance. All of those are based on ideas. I'm not getting what I want. Let go of the world and you will get what you want. Because your self-nature is bliss. Chidananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham, Shankara says. My form is bliss consciousness. I am Shiva. I am auspiciousness. Next verse.
Section 4. Nishchaya Chatur Vidaha. Conviction is of four kinds. Chaturdha Nishchaya Proktaha Purushasya Vicharinaha Apada Mastakam Chaham Mata Pitra Vinirmitaha Ityeko Nishchayo Rama Bandhaya Sadvilokanat. Conviction or determination is said to be in four ways to a reflecting or inquiring person. I am an entity extending from foot to head and brought into existence by my mother and father. Such is one conviction, Rama, leading to bondage due to false or wrong observation.
Yes. So this is the conviction, the ego idea. I am my body. I am the son or the daughter of my parents, and that's what's brought me into existence. Next verse.
Atita sarva bhavebhyo valagrana-dapyaham tanuhu iti dvitiyo mokshaya nishchayo jayate satam. I am finer or subtler than the point of a hair, beyond all thoughts or suppositions. Thus, the second conviction or determination is born for the liberation of the virtuous.
So this is the idea, I am nothing. I am just witnessing consciousness. None of this belongs to me. I am asangaha, unattached. Pure witnessing consciousness. This conviction is conducive to liberation. See what number 3 is.
Jagadjala padartha ma sarvam e vahamakshayah tritiyo nishchayopyevam mokshayaiva raghutama. I am the inner soul or life principle of the things constituting the web of the world. Everything is me only, imperishable or undecaying. Thus, even the third conviction, best among Raghus, Rama, is only for liberation or leads to liberation.
So this idea, this conviction is conducive to liberation. I am, the self in me is the self in all. Everything is just my own self. And I love that term, Jagajala, the web of the world. It's like a spider creates a web and it's all sticky and catches bugs. Web of the world to the unconscious and the ignorant. It's sticky, catches us. But not for the yogi. All of this is just myself. So, nothing to fear, nothing to be concerned about. Just a play of consciousness. So this conviction is conducive to liberation. Let's see what number 4 is.
Aham chedam jagat sarvam shunya vyomasanam sada evameva chaturthopi nishchayo moksha siddhaye. I and this entire world are always like the void sky. Thus, even the fourth conviction or determination is only for the accomplishment of liberation.
So, meditating on everything is empty, shunyata, shunya, empty like the sky. None of it is real. It's all illusory. That one is conducive to liberation. So let's review the 4. First one, I am my body. The world is separate from me. I am the child of my parents. That conviction is conducive to bondage. I am the subtle, the witnessing consciousness. I am unattached to this world. That's conducive to liberation. All of this is me. I am the life essence in everything. The self in me is the self in everything. Conducive to liberation. It's all shunya, void, empty. There's nothing here. No problems. It's all just a picture show. Conducive to liberation. Next verse.
Etesham prathama prokta trishnaya bandhakrit sada shuddha trishna trayas vanye jivan mukta vilasinaha. The first of these is said to be the maker of bondage or the cause of bondage, always by means of desire. But in the other 3, the triple pure desires manifest the liberated while living.
Yes. So, the maintenance of any of these 3 subsequent ideas is conducive to liberation. Now, you don't have to pick one. You can use all 3. Sometimes you might want to meditate, I am unattached. Other times when you're in the world, all of this is me, the person that I seem to be having the problem with, right where the trouble seems to be, there God is, it's myself. There's nothing to get upset about. Or you might want to say, I'm not going to get involved with the politics of the world events. It's all just the play of my, nothing to get worried. Any thoughts?
Didn't you
Next
say
verse.
also?
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Didn't
No,
you
go
say
ahead.
also that being someone to do good and to help others and to be, you know, kind of like, you know, Jesus or like Ramakrishna or people like that, to carry the message and to help other people is also, you said earlier in this book that was a way of liberation or something that the effect, wasn't it?
Well, that's not what he's talking about now. And Justin, I think
Okay.
it would have to do with the motivation.
Yeah.
So if I'm there with codependence,
Mm-hmm.
that my value is in my ability to help other people. First of all, that's better than being an asshole.
Yeah.
But here he's talking about much subtler practices. Much
Okay.
subtler.
My apologies.
Nothing to apologize for ever. Don't bother. You don't need to apologize. That's another narrative. Can you give that one up? Does that make sense?
Yes. Sorry, I muted myself after I asked the question. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We've talked about that, the compulsion to always be sorry. That's another idea. You can let go of it. Next verse.
Purna drishtim avashtabhya dhyeya tyaga vilasinim jivan mukta taya swastho loke vihara raghava. Rama, resting upon the full or fulfilled perception or knowledge which manifests the renunciation of the object to be contemplated or conceived, move about or sport in the world happily or abiding in your own self with the state of liberation while living.
So the idea here is the culmination of the practice of those three convictions is the direct experience of myself as Brahman, the world as Brahman. Then we even give up this jnana abhyasa, this practice of knowledge. When you finally get, it's you, it's your very self. You are not you. Then move in the world. Vilasana, I think, means to revel or to sport, doesn't it, Puneet?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So we go have fun, but don't get attached. Enjoy the funny farm of this world. With the various clowns and princes and princesses, which are all just namarupa, name and form. Ice cubes on their way to melting. Next verse.
Nabhinandati na deshti na shochati na kanshati, ihi tani hitai mukta, sansare na vasiditi. The liberated one does not sink down or perish in worldly existence by desires and displeasures. He does not rejoice, does not hate, does not grieve, and does not desire or expect.
Yes. So there's this evenness to the person of wisdom. But they're happy. They're not dead, shut down. There's an aliveness. I used to love to watch Swamiji. He thought people were very funny. He just used to laugh all the time at how silly we all were. With this great love and open-heartedness, but he did laugh at us a lot. You can have that. Next verse.
Anta satya tya sarvasho, vitarago vivasana, bahi sarva samacharo, loke vihara raghava. Raghava, Rama, having renounced all expectations within or in the mind, free from passion and devoid of mental impressions, sport or move about in the world, having all the necessary conduct outwardly.
Yes. So we think that if I give up all desire, I'll just sit on the couch and be a couch potato. No. Impelled by the force of your past, the prarabdha karma, you will do your thing in the world, playing your role in the drama of life. Some of us are leading characters, others of us are walk-on parts. Others of us are just scenery. But it doesn't matter. Just enjoy. And everyone will get their allotted dose of successes and failures, attention and disapproval, etc. Let it go, let it go. Next verse.
Jim, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
How do you balance this idea that you just shared with the one we talked about earlier around self-effort?
It's hard work in the beginning to not be in that first conviction and instead be in the three. Takes mindfulness, takes attention. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you do, let's say, a report at work, and your boss or your manager is critical of it. The tendency of the mind, the habituated mind, he doesn't like my work. He's a jerk, or I'm a piece of poop. Isn't that what our mind does?
Mm-hmm.
See, so then you do the jnana abhyasa, the practice of knowledge. Oh no, I'm just the witness of it all. It's just the drama of life. My happiness is not dependent on what they say or what this body does. Or this is just the play of the self. This is all just consciousness. you do the third one. None of this is real. It's all shunya, boy. That's the self-effort. Does that make sense? Then when you get rooted in this, just let it all go. Excellent question. Again, you've heard me use this image many times. Shankara says we have a stick, which is our abhyasa, our practice, our mumukshutva, our desire for liberation. And we use it to stir the funeral pyre of the ego. Really burn that corpse up. You don't want any body parts left over. Keep stirring the fire so it's nice and hot. After it's burned up, then you take the meditator, the mumukshu, the abhyasi. Now, practically speaking, there are times when I have to do a lot more practice than others, depending on how identified I might get. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent question. Anybody else? Did you all hear Sheila's question? Shilpa's question. Had the wrong girl. Next verse.
Ayam bandhu ayam neti ganana laghu chetasam udara charita namdu triloki bandhutam vrajet. This is a kinsman, this one is not. Close quote. Such a consideration is of the mean-minded. But to those of noble conduct, the universe consisting of the three worlds attains to the state of kinsman.
Yes. So, again, in the US, among the white people, one of the primary issues we suffer from is alienation. I don't feel like I belong. Among Indians, it's usually enmeshment. I can't seem to separate myself from my family, the expectations they have, and the responsibilities I seem to have. It's my job to fix everybody in their family, and it's their job to be in my business. Does this sound familiar to you, Indians? Yes?
Yes.
Be a problem. So, what Vasishta is saying here is let go of those ideas. And everyone and everything is your kinsman. This is the same teaching that St. Francis of Assisi had. So he talked about his relatedness to everything. Brother sun, sister moon. He used to call his body brother ass, meaning brother donkey. And his dying words were, welcome, sister death. The sense of connectedness, of relatedness to everything in life. Another wonderful meditation, whatever the Lord brings us as a circumstance, this is a gift. This is something that's there for my spiritual unfoldment. It's an opportunity to let go, surrender. All is a gift from God. Especially the things that trouble me. Gifts. Why am I troubled? Attachment, expectation, identification. All these. Next verse.
New section. Punya Papa Vanasanvad. The conversation of Punya and Pavana. Atraivo daharantima sanvadam muniputrayoho asit dirghatapa nama mahendre jnanavan munihi putrau babhuvatustasya punyapavana namakao. In this very matter, they narrate this conversation between the two sons of a sage. There was a sage by name Dirghatapas, possessed of spiritual knowledge in the Mahendra mountain. Two sons were born to him by the name Punya and Pavana. Note, the names are suggestive. Dirghatapas means one doing religious austerity of long duration. Punya is virtue or a virtuous act. Pavana is purifying.
So there's this sage who does tapas, and he has these two sons. Let's go on with the story.
Mata pitro viyoge sau audhya vadaihi karmani punya eva sthito vyagraha pavano dukkha mayayao. On the death of the parents in the funeral rites, that Punya alone was intently occupied. Pavana became sorrowful.
So there's the funerary rites that one does at the death of a parent. So Punya is able to do the duty of a son to do this. Pavana, too busy off in the corner, lost in grief, cannot do the funerary rites. Going on.
Pavano dha prabuddho bhut jnanavan punya evahi pavanam shokta samtaptam punyo vachanam abhravit. Because Pavana was half awakened, Punya alone was possessed of spiritual knowledge. Punya spoke these words to Pavana, who was burnt or afflicted by grief.
Yes. Now, this is not an unusual circumstance. I cannot tell you how many people I've known, their mother or their father is getting close to death, and they're so overwhelmed with grief. What do? They go out and get drunk. They're there in the bar. Oh, I'm so sad. My mother's dying. When what you should be doing is being present to your mother during her transition. It's paradoxical. So Punya is awakened. Pavana knows a little knowledge, but he's still so caught up in his grieving that he can't see the truth. He certainly can't be present. Going on.
Swameva paramam atma padavim mokshanamikam swabhava rupam apanne kim pitarya nushochasi. Why do you mourn over the death of our father, who has gone only to his own supreme position of the self, called liberation, which is of the nature of one's own being?
So Punya says, why are you grieving? My father was a man of realization. It's funny, when Swamiji passed in 1993, so many people were, and I felt a little weird because I loved him a lot, but if there's one thing he thundered for 40 years, I am not the body, you are not the body. And in the early days of my relationship with him, oh, this fantastic person. He's so funny. He's so eloquent. And the teaching, oh my golly, it's so wonderful. Then after a while, it got to the point where, frankly, I knew what he was going to say before he said it. It's incredibly repetitive. But along the way, I learned how to tune into him. It was very clear who Swamiji is this vast emptiness, this thunder of sight, this overwhelming energy. And when the body fell off, none of that went anywhere. Sometimes here in class, when we get really tuned up and there's this thunderous silence, piece of me wants to say, oh, meet Swamiji. What is there to grieve about? So Punya sees this. Bhavana does not. So he's saying, you know, dude, our dad's fine. One more.
Mata pitri sahasrani samatitani te pura putra bandha vavandani janto janmani janmani. Thousands of your mothers and fathers have passed by in former times, and so have multitudes of sons and kinsmen in every birth or incarnation of a living being.
So now he's giving us the same logic that Krishna does in Gita. Gita starts with, they have a beginning and an end, these bodies of the embodied, why grieve over the inevitable? And then he goes on to say, just as a man casts off worn off clothes, so the embodied soul, the inner equipment, casts off these bodies and takes up new ones. So each of us has had thousands and thousands of mothers and fathers and children and relatives, all of whom as forms of God. Ice cubes in the great sea of consciousness, melting, reforming, melting. Such is the flow of life. All right, it's 9 o'clock. What verse are we on for next week, Puneet?
Verse 60.
Verse 60. All right, we'll end here then. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Oh, that's it. Thank you all.